Hello, I'm Skylar, and you're watching Reading into Reality, the new video podcast that takes an analytical view of reality television, pop culture, literature, and so much more. I'm here today to talk about the Traitors US Season 4, Episode 6, and all of the production behind the scenes, the storytelling and writing elements that are included in the production of this episode, as well as some of what the players who are involved have spoken about on social media now that the episode is out. It's taken me a little bit longer to produce this one. To be honest, we're in kind of a moment of crisis, of fear of political violence here in the United States, and it's just been it feels weird to talk about anything that's not that, right? But as this kind of situation goes on, I do feel like, part of me wants to continue to use my platform to speak about like positive things, to give us a little bit of a reprieve in between, doing what needs to be done politically and so forth. As strange as it feels, I am going to continue like to do this sort of experiment that I've been doing, making these videos, posting on YouTube. My heart just goes out to everyone in Minneapolis, everyone who's affected by this violence. And I just hope that it'll come to a safe end soon, right? I just hope for peace for everybody. Without further ado, let's get into it. This episode of Traitors had so many crazy situations going on with it. This is your official spoiler warning. I'm going to talk about everything that happened in episode 6 from beginning to end. I'm not really going to do like a recap because I feel like there's enough channels that do that. Instead, I want to jump into key moments and key characters and really break those down. But I am going to be revealing things like who gets banished and what happens in this episode. So if you haven't watched the episode by now, I advise you to do that first. Of course, we open on our pile of salmon that Maura finally got to come in first and get. There was not one but two plates of salmon there at the breakfast table for the first arrivals. I think there were some other moments in this episode that really jumped out, and we're going to break them all down. It would definitely be the handling of the biggest characters like Ron Funches, like Lisa Rinna, and like Colton Underwood, and seeing what they did that really drove the narrative of this episode, or at least in what we got to see playing out on screen. Now, Ron Funches has been, as this show has been airing, pretty vocal about it seems like he didn't enjoy his time so much filming the show. And I think this episode really actually showed us a lot of why that is. Basically, he is obviously very famous. He's a comedian and actor in his own right, on Apple TV shows and all that. He's got he tours as a comedian. He's very successful. He makes his living that way, but he has never been on a reality show before. And I don't know if the casting team or the production team or whoever made this decision really anticipated how different those worlds truly are. I feel like maybe they thought, oh, we can bring in an actor. We did this with Dylan Efron and it was fine. But the thing about Dylan Efron is he's like a fan of these games, of these social strategy games. He grew up watching Survivor. He kind of understands what's being created in this type of TV. And the thing about reality television is the question of whether what's happening in the game is real or not is kind of a self-defeating question. I would say it's neither real nor not real. It's something in the middle. It's, in other words, a simulation. It's like, you're simulating friendship, you're simulating fights, you're simulating a murder mystery and getting voted out and stuff. But there's a difference between simulation and acting. Simulation is just feels that much more lived in. You know what I mean? And I think that Ron was drawn into this opportunity because he saw like this chance to be acting as if he's like in a murder mystery game, and he didn't understand just quite how immersive it would be and how it wouldn't feel like he's playing a role because of the sort of improvisation and unexpected nature of a social strategy game, right? Where the production is throwing at things at you that they're not going to tell you about, that they want to throw you off your rhythm. I just don't think that he anticipated how different it would feel to be like simulating this murder mystery versus just acting in sort of a murder mystery, if that makes sense. And I think that it's a really helpful paradigm for what's going on here and why Ron is just having such a different interpretation of the game and such a harder time coping with this than the other players. Ron Funches also posted online that he received an autism diagnosis after the season, which, I think that even if he feels some type of way about how it happened, I think it's great for somebody to come to a deeper understanding of themselves, to get that type of self discovery. And, understanding more about yourself and a community you might belong to might help you with, like, just navigating life further on. And I really commend him for that. And I think that it's not a unique experience, to be honest, to go on one of these reality game shows and learn more about yourself in the process. I would say a very similar thing happened to Ian Terry, incidentally, after he went on Big Brother season 14. I do think that he received like an autism diagnosis after that season too, kind of also partly based on the commentary of fans like Ron Funches kind of alluded to in his Instagram stories. Um, but yeah, basically I think that he described the game as like cruel trauma, and I do think that it's that he's having a harder time, as a non-reality player, just dealing with the simulation element. And I just think that maybe even the simulation that you're required to do in Traitors is more psychologically damaging than a Big Brother or a Survivor, or even like a love strategy game like Love Island or Bachelor. It just seems to mess with civilians. Like when they did season 1 of US Traitors, where they mixed in civilians with reality players, it seemed to really mess with some of them who made it farther on in the game, and they just didn't quite get what they were up against when it came to the simulated elements of this that are just not real. But there were he did touch my heart in this episode. I thought that the moment of Ron and Rob Roush at the chess table was really nice. How they kind of had these, you know, touchstones of connection due to the being men from the South, due to being more introverted. They're sort of two birds of a feather in this type of way. I really liked what Rob had to say about that relationship too. Um, but I think for all I'm really getting down on Rob's game here, but I would say that he did the best he could defending himself at the round table. This strategy that he had of saying kind of a, well, if I am a faithful, like, you should vote me out, you know what I mean, to get your answers, and saying this really heartfelt goodbye to the other players, I think it almost worked to get him off the hook, actually. And I wish that it had. I wish I had gotten to see more. But he also seemed kind of ready to go. He said he doesn't trust easily. I would say maybe he doesn't open up that easily. And the other players were seeing that as suspicious, that he adds these kind of off mode that he goes into that I spoke about in the past podcast. And unfortunately, I just think that it was the end of his time. Now, unfortunately, this I did love that it touched Rob Roush's heart, these moments with Ron, but he kind of played much riskier here when he worked to get the votes off of Ron, when he didn't fill in the other housewives that that's what he was doing. He even started to push that he thinks maybe it's not Ron in the kitchen when the other two, Candace and Lisa, were both in there, and they were both looking at him like, what the hell are you doing, dude? um what I think that Rob should have done is he should have told them, like, hey, I think we can get Colton out tonight at the round table if we really try. Like, we won't even have to use a murder on him and have that be suspicious. Like, I do feel like there's enough sus on him. He had the info to do this because he had been at the table of 8, the meeting of 8 in the alliance. But unfortunately, he decided not to tip them off, that Colton would be a target that they could go for instead of Ron. If he is going to try and move to protect Ron, he has to sacrifice someone else to the housewives instead, because otherwise, like, it might end up being one of them, which, like, theoretically those two you should be aligned with because they're both traitors. But instead he didn't offer somebody up to them, and he just, like, I don't know, he came off to those two like he was defending their biggest target without offering an alternative. I can see that like Colton's in his numbers. He feels like Colton really trusts him and isn't going to vote against him in a roundtable, which is fair enough. But he's coming to kind of a crisis point here where he's going to have to choose either Colton or Lisa and Candace. And I think Lisa and Candace is two people to have coming against you, and that's much worse than having one in Colton. I thought that Rob, with his speech of voting for Lisa, really, really, really messed up. His speech was so confident. He sounded like he expected for Lisa to go and that he expected for her to be revealed as a traitor. I think if it had gone that way, like that Lisa had gotten the most votes and been revealed right then, I would have clocked that kind of voting speech as suspicious, because how did he know so certainly that like she was going to get revealed as a traitor? You know what I mean? The game is seeming to get a little bit more strategic here to varied results. For example, Johnny Weir has correctly clocked the numbers in the House. If there's 15 people left in the game in total, he needs 8 to control the vote at the round table. And he sets about this episode trying to whip up his 8. The problem is that he hasn't completely vetted his 8 to see whether or not he's included any traitors in it, or to see whether they're actually going to vote the way that he wants them to vote. So he's trying really hard this episode to get this group of 8 together, and some of them have come together in it, like a Kristen Kish comes with him, a Tara Lipinski, of course, is going to be with Johnny. He's got Natalie Anderson listening to some of this stuff. He's got Stephen Coletti listening to some of his stuff, and Mark Ballas as well, who we'll speak more about in a moment. But unfortunately, he also chooses to include Rob in this circle and to include Candace in this circle. So unfortunately, he's included a couple traitors. But he has done the first step of like creating an alliance. But what he needs to get better at is communicating with his alliance, especially when things change and the game kind of goes live. Like at this round table, there was new evidence brought up that the alliance hadn't previously had that led some of them to even change their votes to Lisa, or to change their votes back to Rob, or to Ron, excuse me, which I didn't quite understand. His alliance ultimately fell apart, and only like 3 of them did vote as planned for Colton. So he needs to get better at like kind of checking in with his alliance at the round table before the vote, being like, okay, are we still on our plan that we talked about before? If I were them, I would say don't turn from the plan, like unless we literally like verbally confirm it. Like you have to stick on the plan. That's the only way to actually have your numbers together. Especially in a situation like this where the vote was so split, unfortunately. So I really, really admired the beginnings of Michael's gameplay, at least. And if he keeps honing this strategy, maybe he can make it work, right? Maybe he can get a crew of faithfuls all together to take out the most suspicious people who are in the game right now. I am also intrigued by what's happening to Mark Ballas's edit, because like I've just said, he is in this alliance of kind of Colton targeters along with Johnny. But he opens the discussion at the round table speaking about having suspicion of like Ron, which is different from what he says in his confessional when he's like back in Johnny's alliance. He's leaning towards voting Colton, it seems. But at this round table here, he kind of speaks against Ron. He leaves the door open to be convinced in other directions, but he ends up voting for Ron. So I don't know if Mark was not understanding what part of alliance is like you do what the alliance decides and you like vote together as a group, like just the basic concept of alliance. I don't know if Mark's not getting that, or if he's being edited in a way that makes this seem just totally nonsensical, which I think is probably the more likely option. Like I'm sure there were other things that he saw and heard and did and discussed that influenced this, but from where I'm sitting, his gameplay looks a little bit incoherent. It's too bad that his edit is so strange like this, because I don't mind seeing him on my screen. It's not like he's terrible in the confessional or anything like this. So why Peacock is doing him like this, the best guess that I have is simply the fact that he's from a different network. Like they are going to center their NBC and Peacock stars. Unfortunately, like it or not, that's the network you're on. So like you got to play ball with them if you want your screen time. And he originates from an ABC show. It's kind of a funny strategy, because I would assume you're casting an ABC star, a Dancing with the Star, in order to draw in the audience from Dancing with the Stars, but that audience isn't going to stay if you don't actually show their fave. So it's this balancing act that Peacock NBC has to do between bringing in new audiences from outside NBCs, showing them the people they want to see, versus like being loyal to the audience they already have here at Peacock with the Bravo stars and the NBC stars. So if I had to guess, that's what I would guess is happening to Mark Ballas's edit. He's getting like cut out because he's an ABC star instead of being an NBC star, essentially. You know, it might not sound fair, but nothing about the game of reality television is fair. Some of the other traders are playing fairly decent games. I would say that Natalie Anderson's aggressive faithful strategy is starting to show its cracks for me, When they were in the cabin doing their challenge, there was an opportunity for players who wanted to get a shield. And Natalie immediately told everybody that anyone who tries to get a shield is gonna be banished, which I thought was a really, really strange logic from her. Like, that's essentially saying that everyone's going to be at risk and telling the traitors, hey, you can murder absolutely everybody you want to. Rob even describes it later in the confessional as a traitors buffet, and like thanks the faithfuls for none of them taking the shield. So I get that it's like a competitive thing, and she doesn't want anyone else to have that chance to beat her, which I get. But unfortunately, I would also say that it just makes her look a little bit suspicious, like a lot of the stuff she's doing. Then again, her looking a little bit suspicious and her being so good in the challenges are both reasons that the traitors have not killed her so far. So maybe it's working out just fine for her, and I'm talking nonsense. I also thought it was really funny that Natalie immediately knew that the banquet would have a catch, right? She is not a newcomer to this type of show. Jam Jam is another player whose luck might start to run out pretty soon if he keeps up some of the oddities in his gameplay. Even though everybody agreed not to get a shield at the cabin, he was trying to go for a shield, sort of. And however, he was sort of able to laugh this off afterwards when they came back to the castle. I think that's because of his gregarious, silly type of personality. He's able to play it off like, oh, I just wanted a shield. I was just really scared of murder, which is what he's been saying the whole game, to be fair. But I think a banishment for Jam Jam is not completely out of the picture. Like, he probably won't get murdered at this point because he's doing so many silly things, but that doesn't mean that the faithfuls can't, like, pick up on that and come for him. As far as strategy goes, the two most notable players here are going to be Colton and Lisa, who are locked in this crazy war in this episode. Colton even says to Lisa that he'll bring them both down to take her out, which I found to be kind of terrifying and creepy, reiterating my thoughts from the previous episode. If this guy is known to have stalked the other reality game players that he's playing with, like, who says he's not going to stalk like Lisa or one of the other folks that he's clashing with after the show? If I'm in the castle with him, I'm going to be afraid. There's been some chatter on social media this week, like Lisa replied to a TikTok in the comments about Colton's previous charges, his previous restraining order that was granted against him. She basically said, like, what, in all caps. And so I suppose this information is new to all the folks who are in the castle. The Traitors also put up sort of an anti-bullying PSA on their Instagram. I'm going to bet that that was a response to some of the chatter that Colton's getting online. My take is that it's not bullying to talk about the actions that a person has done already, like, in their past. Like, I don't know. I just feel like as long as you're not saying anything that's false, you're saying stuff that's true and that's documented, in court, I would say that that's not really bullying to bring up real world things that, if it was me, would have a bearing on my feelings about somebody. And I think that it's important to note that Colton's older husband works in like crisis PR strategy, and I think that maybe the two of them thought that Colton going on this show would be better PR for him. Of course, we're seeing that the result of that is not so, and now this boyfriend is, or his husband, I guess, is, I would assume, like pulling out all the stops. Oh, he's bullied. Like, oh, Colton's the victim. Like, he's always going to flip it around and try and flip that narrative. That's what they call Darvo, like deny, attack, and then reverse victim and offender. It's a pretty classic playbook for somebody who's been found to be in the wrong. So I think it's gross. I think I'm sick of it. And it's just so transparent, I think, is one of the ickiest things about Colton. This is the reason that his strategy plays just don't work. Obviously, the biggest play he makes this episode is his attempt to hold a traitor hostage when he pulls Lisa to the side and is like, I'll protect you at the table if you protect me at the turret. I think the main reason that this doesn't work is just his whole affect and the way he approaches her. It's like I say, he has this kind of smarmy, slimy, overconfident type of manipulation that just becomes so transparent and so off-putting. I think that it's really not bound to work on someone who's like gotten to know you a little bit and figured you out. You know what I mean? It's just so like transparently fake. And later on, he makes this little speech about how she's an icon and a legend, and it felt practiced. It felt rehearsed to me. And again, just transparent that it's not his actual feelings. He has this smug, like, expression on his face at all times, which again is really, really off putting. I feel like nothing about this man is real, at least as he's presenting in the castle. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like we get the truer version of him when he's like raging in his confessionals. Um, and I also think that it's kind of annoying that he's like saying Lisa's not acting like the Lisa Rinna he's heard of. Like, yeah, someone's character on TV is going to be different than their character in real life. And you, as a former reality player too, should know this by now. Um, the one thing that I can give him like his fours on is that he says, like, anyone who defends Lisa, pay attention to that. Like, that will be sus. I worry about Candace because she was sort of defending Lisa at the round table and after the round table. Maybe she can avoid any scrutiny for that because, you know, that's her housewife that she wants to defend, and she's got this, you know, grudge already against Colton. But even Dorinda isn't defending Lisa as much, so this could make Colton detect like Candace as being in cahoots with Lisa. So they're gonna have to be careful about how they play like their togetherness in person. Now, as much as I'm ragging on Colton's game, it's not like Lisa is playing any better in this episode. I think that her first reactions to an accusation are what really, really, really gives her away. Like, the second sentence she says is maybe a better defense, but the first sentence that comes out of her mouth right after someone accuses her is usually like really what just overacted and way too obvious. And I guess that's the soap opera star in ya, right? Like when Colton pulls her into the living room, tries to take her hostage, the first thing she says is, "What are you talking about?" And then after that, she says, "I am a faithful." But the "what are you talking about" to me is really sus because it's like, we all know what the turret is. You don't have to ask what he's talking about. You know what he's accusing you of. Like, you don't have to play dumb. Um, and so, like, the first thing she should have said was, "I'm a faithful." Like, you're barking up the wrong tree, which she eventually gets to. But it's the fact that her first reaction sort of gives her away. She does the same thing at the round table when Colton accuses her. She says to him, "Well, I believe you're a traitor," before she says, "I am a faithful." And again, it's a defensive move, an accusation, a lashing out before she like actually says like, "No, I'm a faithful. No, I'm like with you guys." And I think that that is kind of a red flag that some other faithfuls might pick up on, especially the flipping it back around and accusing someone of whatever they just accused you of. That can come across as really defensive, and it can come across as, oh, you have something to hide, and so that's why you're like going on the attack whenever someone like brings something up about you. So unfortunately, I feel like Lisa's reactions here are not going to be helpful to her in terms of helping her survive much longer in this game. To be honest, I feel like her clock is ticking. And of course, I'll end the episode by giving out my awards. As far as the outfit awards, there's a few things I'm not going to include. I know we saw some like short shots of them getting ready for the banquet, but I think that I'll get to talk about that in depth in episode 7 when it comes out in a couple days. So I'll save it for then. I'm also not going to talk about Colton's outfit because it was ugh, and Stephen Coletti wearing a like plain gray sweater to the round table was really eye roll inducing. Like, can you try at anything at all? Like, honestly, he's been a total miss, a total snooze for me as far as casting. But my favorite outfits this episode, I would say, are Johnny's like black drapey shirt with kind of a sequin hat. I love that he's got this kind of fancy, fabulous menswear going, because too often menswear can be way too boring. But Johnny understands, just like Alan Cumming, of course. I would also say that Maura, she had this like green leather backless dress with a matching green leather tie. I thought that was iconic. Dorinda has a dress with like Amore written across it and a crown, of course, because she's like a queen OG housewife. And then Candace had a super cute like black brocade skirt set with a jacket on top, the little bit of gold on the lining, and she had a matching hat with it as well. All of those were super duper cute, but my favorite honestly has to be Maura's dress. I think the cord, the monochrome, that's so in, that's so hot right now, and it fit her like a glove. Honestly, her outfits have been spot on. I'm loving the like leather looks that she does. For the best one-liner of this episode, there was ample opportunity to choose. I would say, honestly, I was really touched by Rob Roush in the beginning when he was speaking about Ron. He says, like, sometimes the loneliest place for someone like that is in a crowded room. Obviously, that's very touching. They've got their introvert bond that they're forming in that moment. Um, I also thought that a moment that I captured as like a key moment that really explains part of the episode that maybe we don't get to see on camera as much is when Ron's speaking to Dorinda. He says, "I don't feel like we can interact in a way that remains respectful." I do feel like there was a lot of conflict between the two of them that was not necessarily captured in the television show, in the document, but like you can tell that Dorinda was speaking to him in a way that he interpreted as disrespectful, or vice versa, or both. You know what I mean? Whatever about those two, they just really riled each other up. But I have to admit, I did giggle when he said that. Like, I ate it up. Um, and I loved when Rob, had voted for Lisa. He knew he was about to be in trouble. He says, "This is about to be bad for Robbie Bobby." It was so weird. He's so weird. Like, he truly is just like some guy they pulled out of like a swamp where he's like catching snakes. And I think that's beautiful. Like, that's how reality TV casting should always be. Whoever found him deserves a huge bonus. And then there was a moment where like Lisa was speaking to Colton after the roundtable, and she was really mad that he sort of expected her to be like a housewife from TV. She says to him, "Don't expect me to be a housewife because I'm Lisa fucking Rinna. I was Lisa fucking Rinna before Housewives, and I'm Lisa fucking Rinna after." And yeah, this is a woman with a career that spans decades. Like, you are nothing compared to her. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like the way he wanted to interpret her was so like shallow and flat and one-sided. Like, oh, women can only be like what you see of them on TV. Honestly, like, it reveals a lot about his attitudes. And then the last quote I have in this one-liners section is what Ron said right before he was voted out. He says, "I understand that this world is completely fake, and that makes it harder to see someone who is real." Of course, I love this line because it really cuts to the quick of like what I felt like Ron was dealing with in this game. The fact that it was completely fake was just too uncomfortable for him. But of course, I have to choose Lisa fucking Rinna for this one as my best one-liner. Um, I have some nice facial expressions I found this episode. Like, Ron, when they started the roundtable, he picked up his chalk as if he's already ready to vote, which I thought was a nice touch. And Rob Roush is taking so long to vote that he's like scrunching, he's covering up his face. Alan even has to hurry him along. He also has like a little post roundtable where he's scared and hears Lisa's voice yelling from run room, and he immediately like turns, goes the other direction. And then, like, after, when she finally tracks him down, she's, like, pointing her finger accusingly in his face, like, her eyebrows raised, her mouth ajar. And that moment, though, when Rob heard Lisa and just ran the other direction, with a little whoop on his face, that's what I had to choose for my facial expression. And my last category is my character award. One of those, my favorite character from this episode would be Johnny, because he's got this kind of strategic sleigh that he's on. He came ready. He came dressed to the nines. He came to get his team together of his most trusted people. He was locked in for this entire episode in his confessionals and his dialogues, and I thought that that was a really awesome breakout app for him. I also thought that Tara had a really strong episode here. She's kind of got this ingenue, innocent sort of archetype that she's filling, but now she's picking up her evidence, going hunting a little bit, like becoming a little bit of the badass girl. Speaking of the badass girl, Natalie Anderson continued to kick ass in this episode, but what else is new? Honestly, I think that woman is made for competitive games. We need to see her on TV all the time. I know she has a young kid, but like, he can handle it. Get a nanny or something. No, seriously though, Natalie really brought it this ep. She was so competitive, so on the ball as always. But my character award goes to actually Lisa Rinna. I loved the way that she spoke in this episode about like how she's not sort of a housewife all the time. That's not what she lives. That's not who she is. But it is something that she can, quote, turn on. I thought that that was fascinating, and it really speaks to the kind of skill that I have been digging into and trying to investigate when it comes to reality TV performance. You know, are you acting? Are you kind of turning on a persona, a simulation of yourself? The way that Lisa spoke in this episode, signs point to yes. So that made her absolutely my favorite character. It was so fun to really break down all of the key moments in this episode, and I'll be back in just a few days to talk about episode 7. I cannot wait to see what happens. I've been hearing for a while from Alan Cumming that when you hear the word banquet, you know shit's gonna go down. So I am so thrilled. Thanks again for watching. If you want to leave a like, leave a comment, even a follow if you want to see what I'm making next. I have some videos that are going to be branching out a little bit from the television reviews, so stick with me. I have a lot of obsessions, deep dives, research that I've been working on, and maybe we'll bring to this platform if all goes well, fingers crossed. Thanks again for being here, and I'll catch you next time.